quote is about water, but I like thinking of it in relation to the breath as well. So here's the quote. The wave comes in, washes over and runs up, and turns around and recedes back to the ocean. I kind of like that as the breath, in a sense that we get the breath from the ocean of air. It's the outside, comes in, washes over us, and then recedes back into the ocean of the water. And it's just a continuous flow and cycle. I find that really calming and beautiful to think about. Anyway, the workshop. Today, the idea behind this is to give people a bit more of an understanding about something that we do quite frequently. We breathe about 25,000 times a day, and a lot of us don't really know what we're doing when we're breathing, which sounds really stupid because it's breathing. But a lot of people don't really have a full understanding, in-depth understanding about what we're doing and why we're doing it. So today I want to try to provide that little bit of an insight, and then do a couple of breathing exercises that will hopefully allow you to optimize and really increase the efficiency of your breathing and your breath in general. I guess a bit of a who am I first is kind of important though before we dive into it. Who am I to be providing this information? And the truth is I always ask myself the same question when I'm talking about pretty much anything, even things that I've studied for like this. But here we go, we're here. So I'm a physiotherapist or a physical therapist, and usually work with the body to improve function and movement, and that includes the breath. So it includes improving the function of our breathing and includes the efficiency of our breathing. And in hospital settings, that's really physiotherapists' main role, is to allow people to move, mobilize, breathe, and cough, and make sure that the respiratory system is working well. So that's part of our job. It comes under a job description. I guess outside of work, something that I find really important in my other life is human optimization, trying to get the most out of what we do. And while I don't always practice it perfectly, I like to breathe, I like to meditate, I like to dance, I like to run, I like to read, and most of that is trying to find the best way for us forward. And then after I've found it, to share it to other people. Always share the medicine with the people once you've found it. So that's what I'm doing. Anyway, let's get on with it, shall we? So the workshop. So I kind of like to start anything that I'm doing with an understanding as to why I'm doing it. I also apologize, I have my computer over here with all my information on it, because I like making sure that I get things correct, I guess. So I apologize if I'm looking over there and not at you guys, but yeah, it's to make sure you guys get it correct as well. So anyway, the way I want to start with this breathing exercise is to give you guys the operating system of operating instructions for the breath, and in my opinion, to use the machine, you have to understand the machine. So we're going to go through this little operating system, and to be perfectly honest, I have breath as one of the first chapters for many reasons. One, the ability to control our stress. Two, the ability to improve our immunity. Three, the ability to work through pain, and also improve our stability of our spine and our skeletal system as well. So it's all important, and it ties in hugely to the rest of the body's functioning. So we're going to build that understanding together, and essentially the way I want to do this is by pretending that we're on the Magic School Bus, with that TV show when we were kids, or maybe your kids' TV show, should I say, where the school kids went on these field trips in a school bus that could shrink to different sizes, or grow to different sizes, and experience it in real time. So we're going to do that together with the breath. Now, I want us to imagine we've been shrunk all the way down to the size of a particle, like an air particle. I want you to look out the windows of the bus and really experience. You can close your eyes if you want to. I want you to really experience what's going on. Everything's massive. If you're looking at the particles around you, from about the 100 particles around you, there's only about 21 that are oxygen. So that means essentially that there's 21% oxygen in our air. The rest is nitrogen, hydrogen, other compounds. But it's not heaps of oxygen. We always kind of think that oxygen is the main thing there. Anyway, We feel a massive pull towards us and we're dragged into the body. We're into the nose, ideally. Pass through all the hairs, pass through the mucus and the sinuses and get dragged down. Now, the way that we get pulled in isn't by us being sucked in. The way it works is our diaphragm pulls down, which opens out our ribs. Opening out those ribs essentially creates a low pressure space inside our chest, kind of like a syringe pulling back. Water gets dragged up. It's not the little space on the inside of the syringe, it's behind the syringe being dragged back, and it's the same with the air. So we get pulled, we get pulled in through the nose, down through the windpipe, and down through the roads that forever split pretty much until we get all the way down until the lungs. Now, in the lungs, we keep on going all the way down until we reach alveoli. Now, the alveoli are little sacs. If you look around, this is a bit of goo, a bit of blood. And this is essentially the train station for the air particles. So it's where or the airport really, because it's kind of on a totally different plane, but it's where the air particles meet the blood particles, and they sort of switch in and out. So the carbon dioxide guys are getting off behind us and going back up the windpipe, and we're getting on. So we jump onto these red blood cells that have a perfect space for the oxygen molecules, and we fly into the bloodstream. That takes us back to the heart, which then pumps us out around the body. Now, I understand this knowledge isn't too revolutionary, and I apologize if you know this more than some other humans, but I think it's important to start from the basic and work our way up. Anyway, we go around the body. We reach our target destination. Let's pretend it's our leg muscles. So we're in our leg muscles and we're being used for aerobic respiration. The oxygen molecules next to us are. Aerobic respiration essentially allows for the body to function mainly off air. So that's the reason we need air, is so we can function, our cells can keep on firing. A good example of this is thinking about how when you cut off blood to the neck, to the head, the brain shuts off pretty quickly. So it really needs the oxygen pretty frequently. So it takes glucose, oxygen, comes out, carbon dioxide is a byproduct as well as energy. So the carbon dioxide, which we'll jump on next to, will come back into the leg, we'll jump back on to the bloodstream, into the capillaries, up through the veins, straight back up towards the heart. The heart will pump us in towards the lungs, and here we'll get off the same train and jump back into the air pipes, into the lungs. Windpipe will take us up, all the way up, expelled out either through the nose or the mouth. Those make the biggest of differences. Now we'll jump on a few of those points as we go along. We'll dive into some nose breathing in a second. We'll also dive on to some diaphragmatic breathing and some box breathing as we go along. There's going to be a couple of exercises as we go through, but also quite a bit of information. So take what you will from it. I understand it can be a little bit dense, but the exercises themselves will be very beneficial in their own right. What I'm going to go through with you guys now is a nose clearing exercise. Now, this is really cool. A lot of people try to use sprays and Vicks inhalers and all that sort of stuff, and it does work for a short amount of time. But the reason that we don't breathe through our nose, we'll delve into a little bit later, a bit more. But really, the reason we don't breathe in through our nose is because our body's been trained not to, both habitually and through evolutionary processes, because everything's kind of shortened up. But we still have congestion. That's part of the problem. So I'm going to teach you guys an exercise by a guy called Patrick McKeon. It's also part of the Buteyko method. And it's really cool. It's quite short, doesn't take too much time, and essentially it works by breathing in and out through your nose, holding your nose, and then breathing back in through your nose. It seems really simple, but essentially it teaches the body and trains the body to try to use the nose a bit more. So we're going to do that. We're going to do that together now. Essentially, it's going to be a really short breath in through the nose and a really short breath out through the nose, and that should be controlled. So it should be silent and easy. So small, nothing deep, nothing of that, just small. Do a couple of those, and after you've got a couple going, the last one should be really small, and then I want you to block your nose after the way out. And we're going to sway, kind of like snakes, as if they're being snake charmed. You're going to keep going until you feel the need to breathe. Now, it shouldn't be uncomfortable. It should just be a little bit tight in the chest, a little bit choked. When that happens, breathe in through your nose, and then out through your nose. It should be a little bit easier already. Now, I want you just to normalize that breath again, and then as you're ready and as it's normalized and you're back to a normal heart rate, I want you to try again. You're going to do this between 2 to 6 times, depending on how clogged up your nose really is. And everyone's different. So some people need 20 of these and some people need 2. Depends how congested you are to start with. But the more that you're conscious of breathing through your nose after it and then going forward, the easier it will be to continue breathing through your nose. And we'll touch on those reasons in a second. So while you're enjoying your cleared nose, I want to touch on something that kind of causes that to work, and that's the need to breathe. So I want you to picture that you're riding on an exercise bike really quickly, or you're sprinting on a treadmill, or you're just running like a normal person outside, and you really need to breathe. You're sprinting, your lungs are burning, we start panting through our mouth, right? So I want you to hold that thought for a second. We're going to explore why we feel like we need to breathe, and especially through our mouth. So the need to breathe isn't actually caused by our need for oxygen. It's caused by our need to get rid of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, as we've discussed before, is the byproduct of energy production, essentially, within our body. And us breathing it out gets rid of that acidic substance from our body. Really important. Our body has something called chemoreceptors within it, which detects the level of acidity within our blood. When it gets to a certain point, our body thinks we're choking because we've got too much carbon dioxide and it feels as though we haven't breathed. And our body breathes out and breathes in as much as it can. So gulps in through the mouth. I've already touched briefly during the Anatomy Park / school bus edition of our breathing cycle that our nose helps get the air primed for the lungs. So we know that we want to be breathing in through the nose. The reason we don't is because it's difficult. Again, we touched on that briefly before, and we'll do it again in a second, but we want to get as much in and out as possible, so our body just blows off all that carbon dioxide. That's good in the sense that we get rid of the carbon dioxide, but what it does, and what hyperventilating does, is it actually drives down the level of acidity within the body into a basic level, which is the opposite of acidity, which becomes problematic because the way that our blood absorbs oxygen is when there's a need based on the level of acidity in the body, in the blood. So when there's too much basicness, or not enough acidity, should I say, in the blood, the body doesn't think that it needs more oxygen. So it doesn't actually absorb the oxygen that you're breathing in anyway. So you're just blowing a lot of it off. You can see where this becomes a problem. You're blowing a lot of carbon dioxide off, not taking a lot of oxygen in, and that becomes just a self-fulfilling prophecy. The best way to get through that actually is breathing through your nose, slowing the breath down, and working on maintaining whatever breath you have. Slowing it down. Slows your heart rate down as well, which is very convenient during the exercise program. I want to touch on carbon dioxide tolerance though. It's the important and kind of interesting thing that's emerging at the moment in research is carbon dioxide tolerance. It's being used at the moment to improve people's mental health. So the idea of stress, anxiety, depression, fears, phobias, a lot of that is being treated at the moment in trials by an increased carbon dioxide tolerance. So the idea is that at the moment people have a really reduced carbon dioxide tolerance. People are trying to improve that tolerance and finding really good positive results with those conditions. Another point that I want to make is breath holding. Now, breath holding is actually quite good for you under certain conditions, obviously. Don't just do it when you're driving or swimming by yourself. Make sure that you're doing it with people and surrounded by people under some form of guidance. But the way that breath holding works isn't by being able to retain a certain amount of oxygen. Obviously, that's relatively important, slowing all the systems down in your body. You sort of see people doing a lot of meditation in terms of breath holding before free diving, for instance. But the way people are able to dive to a maximum of 214 meters, which is preposterous, down, or hold your breath for up to 22 minutes, which is a basic episode of a TV show, without taking a breath, is by improving their carbon dioxide tolerance, not just by allowing the lungs to expand more and hold more oxygen. So something to really grapple with is that the idea that we need to breathe isn't actually necessarily a need to breathe, but our body just saying we breathe now because there's too much acidity in the blood for what we like. So we're working on that, proving that actually has been shown to improve health and improve mental health and just our overall well-being, which is really important and interesting as a part of it. Now, I've touched on nose breathing a lot. We're going to dive into that a little bit now, with your newly cleared nose from before. So essentially, nose breathing is imperative for our health. There have been many studies done of mouth breathing compared to nose breathing. There was a recent one that was done that's being published soon, that essentially takes two people and shows their experiences with nose breathing for 10 days as opposed to mouth breathing, and then vice versa, and the health differences that occurred during that period. So mouth breathing has been associated with increased stress levels, increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, decreased sleep, increased stress, increased inflammatory type conditions. A lot of things that mouth breathing has been shown to contribute to, and nose breathing is essentially the exact inverse. So it reduces the blood pressure, reduces the heart rate, reduces your stress levels, it improves your sleep. So all of these small things are really important that we just don't really think about. The reason that I'm bringing this up, it kind of should be explanatory by itself, but the reason that I'm bringing this up is because a few hundred years ago we were like the rest of the animal kingdom. We were relatively efficient breathers, but over the last few hundred years we're now known as the worst breathers in the animal kingdom, and that significant change happened in such a small period of time. And one of the reasons is due to processed foods. And essentially what happened is we started chewing less, eating less amounts of food that required so much chewing, so more processed, softer foods. And that took away a lot of our jaw strength. So a lot of us, me included, preferentially breathe through our mouth. And essentially that worsens. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you breathe through your mouth, because the jaw becomes smaller, hangs open more because of the less amount of, I guess, muscle tone around the jaw, the less that we breathe through our nose. And the body responds to that. The body says, okay, you're not breathing through your nose. We're going to clog up your nose a little bit more. We're going to shut off the sinuses. We're not going to use that area. We're going to try to use that area for better things within the head. And so that just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you breathe through your nose, the more that you can't breathe through your nose anymore. Sorry, the more you breathe through your mouth, the less you can breathe through your nose. Another interesting little tidbit on the processed foods is the idea of the strong jaw. So the idea of chewing and improving our facial structure has been linked to I guess the decrease in humans' ability to have really good faces. And this is shown through orthodontic records over the last few hundred years, and looking at skulls and I guess dental records for a while. And over the last few hundred years, our jaws and our faces have started shrinking. So we've gone from less of a nice U shape to quite a strong angular mouth, and that causes a need for extractions of teeth, orthodontic work like braces. And unfortunately, in the last sort of 70 to 100 years, orthodontic work has gone from trying to expand the mouth to fit it all in to just quick fixes of take teeth out, bring everything back together, and making everything smaller. So our tongues don't really fit in our mouth properly anymore, which makes it difficult for us to breathe because we can't hold our tongue there. That then causes sleep apnea and snoring and chokes us in our own sleep on our own tongue. It's crazy. Anyway, nose breathing. We're going to do an exercise together on nose breathing. Simple, stupid, I'm sorry. As I said, basics today, basics. You can get to more expansive stuff as you go along, but you need to understand how to breathe first. So we're going to start with posture, not back posture, though that's important, but mouth posture. So the roof of your tongue is where the roof of your mouth is where your tongue should be. Like that, as if the tongue is being brought up from the back and then flat across the top. Your teeth should be closed, but not clenched, and your lips should be sealed, but not squished. From there, especially after you've just done your nose clearing exercise, what we're going to do is a breath of 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out, which has been shown to be the most efficient, relaxing breath, the most nourishing breath. So doing this consistently will help you. We're going to start with just a few rounds of it together. We'll do 5 rounds of 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out through the nose. No rests in the middle. So let's go together. one last one together. And out. So the reason for that 5-5 breath is that it's been shown to be the most natural breathing pattern for us at rest. We should be breathing approximately 5 to 6 times, which takes up about 5 to 6 seconds in and out. And it actually takes in about 5 to 6 litres of oxygen if you're breathing well, so it's quite symmetrical. There's always beauty in nature's symmetry, I find. The cool thing about that is that there have been studies that have shown that chants and prayers and meditations and mantras, that they force the body to breathe in at that pace. So it's almost as though it's mimicking something that we already knew, but didn't really know necessarily, or maybe it was purely planned. So anyway, on to the next exercise. Before we jump into the next exercise, I want to go through a little bit about the mind-body connection that the brain, that the breath sort of provides and gives rise to. So there's a prolific Buddhist philosopher who says that the breath is the bridge which connects life to consciousness, which unites the body to your thoughts. Whenever the mind becomes scattered, use your breath as a means to take hold of your mind again. And scientifically that makes heaps of sense. There's a system in our body called the autonomic nervous system, Now, the autonomic nervous system controls all of the automatic processes within our body, henceforth autonomic, and it's for centuries been thought to be relatively automatic. Now, we can use the breath as that bridge to start accessing and bringing back control into that system. So the autonomic nervous system is the system that gives rise to the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight response. So blood goes to the extremities, allows us to run or fight, goes away from our organs, which we don't need as much, and our heart rate increases, our blood pressure increases, stress response and stress hormones get released, and our vision narrows. So we actually really struggle to make long-term decisions. We struggle to process our food. We struggle to breathe, just be. So when we breathe in the sympathetic nervous system, a lot of the time it's shallow, it's panting, it's quite high up in the chest. And that actually exacerbates the system. It spirals it a little bit more, which isn't always a bad thing. We need a little bit of stress to ensure that we have the ability to fight things off, whether that be disease or whether that be a saber-toothed tiger. Stress actually helps us in that regard, and that's where the Wim Hof type breathing comes into it, and an ability to stimulate that stress response. But again, it's still about being able to control those systems. Where we want to be, though, generally, is in the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and digest system, or the feed and breathe system, as it's also known as. Now, what this system does is this brings blood back to our prefrontal cortex, allows us to make long-term thinking decisions, brings it back to our gut, brings it back to the organs that allow us to actually function a lot more efficiently and effectively. And that's really important. So when we're in a stressed scenario, stressed situation, such as being cut off in traffic, being on a Facebook argument, anything stupid, being in a real life argument even, or running, just being in an exercise type environment. We don't really want to be stressed, but our body is jumping to that point. Being able to use our breath is a really, really gives us a distinct advantage in our ability to control our body's systems, and allow us to be more calm, make better decisions, and live healthier, really, to be honest. When we're overloading our sympathetic nervous system, it sort of takes away any ability to really be in the sympathetic nervous system when something needs to come up. It's almost as though we get fatigue in that nervous system. So being able to bring ourselves back into the calm that we want is really, really important. And we can use our breath to do this. We're going to be doing an exercise together to achieve this, ideally. That exercise is going to be box breathing. Now, Box breathing is an exercise that is used, should I say, by elite military forces such as the Navy SEALs. It's used by clinicians such as myself, or mental health experts even, to allow people to come back to the present, really focus on that breath, do some deeper breathing, which allows for the lower lobes of the lungs to expand, which is a lot more where the parasympathetic nervous system nerve ends are. And it brings us back to the present. So that's the reason that the Navy SEALs use it. It's allowed for them to be mindful, make decisions, and think through stressful scenarios. It also helps people through panic attacks just by focusing on the breath and allowing them to give themselves control of the breath a little bit more. Before we do that, I need to talk to you about the diaphragm, because we're going to be using the diaphragm for this one. Now, the diaphragm is a dome-shaped muscle, which we discussed previously. And essentially, the way that it works in a bit more detail, because we touched on it before, but the diaphragm is a muscle that attaches to the bottom of the ribs, the bottom of the lungs, to the lower back, and then to the front of the ribs. So it's got like a domed, arched shape in a 3D form, kind of like that type position. The diaphragm is imperative in spinal health and back health as much as it is in lung health. It attaches into the lumbar spine, and when we're utilizing it correctly, it provides an increased stability, which is the reason that weightlifters breathe in and brace their core. As you're breathing in, the abdominal wall stiffens, which, as we said before, opens the ribs out, splints them open, which gets the air in. But what it also does is it creates a muscular corset around our lower back and our abdominal region, which protects our spine quite significantly. It's also the most efficient way to breathe, and it calms the body down, which is what we were briefly discussing in the brain-body connection. When we're breathing in with our diaphragm in deep, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It brings us back to a system that we can utilize to be calm. Now, when we're breathing in through this, all it requires is a bit more conscious thought. Using your nose increases the amount of diaphragmatic use that we have. But what we're going to do is we're going to put our hands on our ribs, the base of our ribs. You can do this in lying or in sitting. You're going to be sitting up nice and tall. And we're going to be taking a breath in, and the aim is to expand the hands at the base of the ribs. So that's when you know that the ribs are opening up from the bottom. And then letting it really collapse back in. Your belly should almost go out as you breathe in and in as you breathe out. A lot of people breathe in reverse because our chest and our neck muscles do a lot of the work, and that can create a lot of pain and fatigue in our neck. Box breathing, which is the exercise that we're going to do to finish off pretty much, requires a 4-part breath of 4 counts. The first is 4 seconds in. The second is a 4-second breath hold. And it's 4 seconds out, and then a 4-second breath hold. We're going to, again, be utilizing the diaphragmatic breathing to try to get control of this system. And you can use this whenever you need to. You don't have to use it just as diaphragmatic breathing. It can be if you're lying in bed trying to get to sleep. It can be, on a dance floor. It can be at work. It can be driving. It can just be sitting in a table. So we're going to do this together. We're going to do 4 rounds of it. So 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds in, 4-second hold, 4-second out, 4-second hold. We might just do that 3 times actually, but you can do it as many times as you need to by yourself. So we're going to do this now. Hands on our diaphragm. We're going to go in for 4. Out for 4. And hold. In for 4. Hold. Out for 4. Hold. One more. In. Really expanding to the base of those lungs. Out. And hold. That's cool. So that's box breathing. Now, we've done a lot of talking, and I apologize if you were sort of hoping for a more transcendent experience, but the breath is something that I'm obviously quite passionate about, and there's a lot more to it, and I have many more things to say, but we're going to leave it at that. I want you to use these 4 different exercises, or 3 different exercises if you want to combine them together. The nose clearing exercise, so you can breathe in through your nose, and then the diaphragmatic breathing, and then the box breathing, and put them all together. Utilize them when you need them. Utilize them when you're feeling a bit stressed to get control of that monkey mind, that reptilian, quick thinking, go mind. Bring it back into something that's a little bit more thought process oriented, a little bit more controlled. And you'll go a long way to allowing yourself to be a lot more thoughtful, a lot more calm, and make a lot better decisions under stress. I hope you've gained some form of knowledge from this. I always love talking about it. If you want to look into any more resources, I highly recommend a book that came out quite recently called Breath by James Nestor. You can of course look into the Iceman Wim Hof's work. He's fantastic. Or you can go down the path of holotropic breathing with Stanislav Grof. Alternatively, you can also look at a book called The Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McKeon. It's a brilliant book that goes through the importance of breathing, and breathing slowly, and breathing with correct technique. I love you a lot. Thank you very much for sticking with me. And I hope you have a fantastic virtual Burning Man, and that you're staying well. As I always like to say with my videos, if you're struggling with any breathing exercises, or if you're struggling with anything in life, it's okay. There's no problem. Stop, take a breath, and try again. Have a fantastic day.